Alright, we're back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, there are a lot of different training camp news revolving around injuries and even some recent deals that have just kicked in and posed a question for other potential beneficiaries or those who are just suffering from the outcome of these specific contracts. But nevertheless, there is one important follow-up to get to, and that relates to Tony Romo, who was previously arrested on an OWI charge in Milwaukee, and with him being a first-time offender on that charge, and frankly, overall in his life, not having any criminal incident beforehand, it felt as though the penalty at the time in the specific rule itself was going to be fairly simple, not expecting a lot of overall punishment from him at that time. Then you had the body cam footage come out from the arresting party, and it did not end up going as smoothly as you would have expected. Of course, they are ordained by these departments now in the advent of such horrific social situations over the past few years involving police and regular citizens, that you have to have this body camera footage on to make sure that you're doing your due diligence as an officer and that you aren't doing anything that falls out of the line of standard protocol and procedure. In this instance, you have the arresting officer coming up, and at that time they're on the highway as this is going on, so you see instances of them not being able to hear each other, but eventually the question is asked by Tony Romo as to why he was stopped, and as the officer stated across multiple sources, he saw that in Tony Romo's eyes they looked red and glassy. He had the odor of an intoxicating alcoholic beverage, and also in that same sentence, he was told that he was pulled over for unsafe passing, lane deviation, and cutting across the gore, end quote. So, again, you are under the influence in some matter while you're operating this vehicle. It's obviously dangerous. This officer would be well within their right to pull someone over in this context. You just want to do your job and make sure that they are not a danger to themselves or to others. With a moving vehicle going however fast it may be at the time, you just never want to have that kind of risk floating about. And so Tony Romo is there on the highway, as awkward of a position as it may be, being interrogated about this, being asked about the odor in the car and where it could have possibly come from. Plus, he had stated before that he was on his way to visit his grandparents, with them both being found as dead as of this entire timeline. Now, I can't necessarily speak on what he would mean by that. You know, that could mean several different things. There could be something very personal. He was trying to participate in and involve the idea of seeing his grandparents, potentially in a more solemn setting, like a gravesite. But again, I can't speculate as to that. That wasn't specified. It's just what he himself said. So, again, that all matters in a situation like this. You know, as much as you want to be fair on both sides, it makes a lot of sense to take that and, you know, get more of an understanding on where he may be coming from in this situation. So we have all that go down, and eventually, because of the noise surrounding them, they move to a different location where you have Tony Romo go through the field sobriety tests and everything. Now, all the other reports initially had stated that he performed poorly on them, and as a result, it led to the arrest. It's one thing to write that out and type up the idea of such and such performed poorly on this or didn't perform well on a specific aspect of physical movement. It's one thing to write that out. It's another thing entirely to see it in real time. And it just was a little chaotic. On one hand, Tony Romo cited his back issues as a problem and a bit of a hindrance in his ability to effectively perform them. And maybe in a way that is fair. It was the reason, after all, why he had to close out his NFL career due to that injury. And, as an older man nearing his 50s, you can understand that might creep up on you a little bit. Still, though, these are simple directions he was being given. He was being asked to move his eyes without moving any part of his head. Clearly to see if, his tracking was on point. So you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. Wherever the officer is telling you to look or putting their finger around to point at, you're looking in that specific direction. He continued to move his head, so he wasn't following those orders at all. And you just had this constant back and forth between him and the officer when it came to the most routine things. All part of the job here. Not necessarily anything that would implement a bit of a conflict between either of these two at the moment. Tony Romo eventually got to a point where he just refused to do some of these exercises outright and continued to call for a lawyer. Now, it's not something that is unheard of. You hear people say this all the time, especially when it comes to interrogations, about wanting their lawyer and about wanting their representation present before they speak on anything that could incriminate them. That's true. The thing is, in a matter where they are checking to see whether or not you are intoxicated, it just doesn't feel like it was appropriate at all to cite that as an issue. And, when the tasks are this simple, you just failing to commit to do any of them is in and of itself a problem. What also stood out, and what a lot of people probably saw as the true icing on the cake for this entire context, was the fact that he did not consent to a breathalyzer test. That was a part of the original reporting as well, that even though they arrested him on OWI, they didn't have an idea of his blood alcohol concentration. They did not have an idea of what truly was in his system at the time. And as a result, we got the notion that, this was the context here. We arrested him. He will face this penalty, but we don't have any other context now. So that was one part of it. And that would be the reason why we didn't have information before on a BAC form, because he didn't admit himself to a breathalyzer test. The tricky thing about that is, even though he can say that, legally, whenever you get a driver's license, there is implied consent. They just ask you whether or not you want to admit to it to essentially test you in that moment. They still have, even if they don't ask you, the idea of executing a breathalyzer test is already baked in to the license itself whenever you get your hands on one. And so with that, Romo didn't do himself much of a favor there either. Like, yeah, you can say that. You're free to. It's just that in the law, we already have the right to give this test to you and make sure that you are sober or not. And then we can continue to operate in the way that we will to serve justice in the manner that it is needed. You get that failed breathalyzer, matter of fact, no breathalyzer at all, and then, as other sources stated as well, they, quote, found an open bottle of alcohol in his car. He was cited for having an open container of alcohol in his car when he was pulled over, according to the police report, end quote. So, yeah, just a lot of little things lining up into something that makes the situation a little worse than we'd like to admit. Because it's one thing to state an OWI charge is a first time offense for him. There's not much to be made of it. While an open container of alcohol in your car can lead you to believe several different things. Because either you're being completely irresponsible with the items in your car, or you, while operating the vehicle, were under the influence, as people would think. And so with all that lining up, you would have Romo, for one, apparently have a few other charges and citations tacked on to this hearing that he will still have on September 21st. So that is still underway. Also, it clearly woke CBS Sports up, because they would decide to, on Friday, per Adam Schefter and across multiple sources, quote, place Romo on leave. Yeah. They actually decided to have him step away from his role. And they said, quote, until further notice, per their statement. So this isn't a matter of, we're just going to take him off for a week, 2 weeks. No. They're giving themselves the final and outright autonomous say on how they will best proceed with his specific contract and with his specific time there as the leading color commentator for the company, with that news coming out. You know, I was saying myself that, hey, I don't think he would get fired from the network, and that can still be true to this extent. Hearing this report now complicates that a little bit and adds another layer to the situation, because they could have easily put a band-aid over it and addressed it as a non-issue. The way CBS Sports sees it, when they come out and they say that, is that it's only one component of a larger problem that may have been occurring there for years to this point. And frankly, a lot of the sources alluded to this notion when I discussed, you know, some of the weirder toms that Romo had fallen on in his role with CBS Sports. It leads you to a lot of the feedback that Romo has gotten over the past few years. He has seen a decrease in overall likability when it comes to these feedback polls. He has seen a decline in his overall ability to color commentate when you ask some people, because he has literally gone from showcasing one of the smarter football minds out there into relegating his stuff as a bit of a biased commentator when it comes to him constantly, and I mean constantly, just going in full throttle about how great Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and a lot of these specific players that he pinpoints on these teams are, while failing to address the larger context of the game itself. Like, there have been talks of this around Tony Romo for at least a good couple years now. And it's continued to devolve into him making weird noises. You see, for as much as we, appreciate the memes as a general fan base, I don't know, Jim. Yeah, like, it can be funny to a fan base. For the people working on a TV product, trying to put out as great of a broadcast as you can, it just does not really look the greatest on paper. Then you have this notion about he and Jim Nantz just having a bit of a power struggle. Them being viewed as Nantz having to pull all the weight to make up for what Tony Romo isn't doing. You never want to hear about something like that going on with a 2-man cast or a 3-man cast. You want everybody pulling their fair share of weight. You can get as creative with it as possible. It doesn't have to be always made up of one guy just being a complete football geek the entire time. But the chemistry that a pairing must possess is everything in the broadcasting business. And if you don't have it, the second you start losing it, there are going to be questions. And they formed. You can argue that, sure, in any other context, CBS Sports might not have worried about saying a lot. And that could set a very awkward precedent for them. In this case right here, maybe this is the result of some build-up, but it's well worth it if it means that you give yourself time to reevaluate. Because you have other people in the sports media industry calling this contract that Tony Romo signed for 10 years and $180 million in 2020 the worst contract in sports. And they were saying this when he was viewed with way more respect. Again, compared to some of his other color commentators, and compared to Mark Sanchez, which I myself tried to, argue that, okay, the situations that both of them were involved in are far different from one another. He's obviously more respected than Mark Sanchez still, but again, it's on the decline. It is, what have you done for me lately? Business on the sports media side, just like it is with players in the NFL. And the production, the ratings show that. Not necessarily the viewership numbers for some of the games. The ratings that they get back when it comes to the production team have just not been as high. So with that, they placed them on indefinite leave. And with that, quote, CBS Sports also named J.J. Watt as Romo's replacement, per Adam Schefter and other sources as well. This is why I say that there is a bit, there are a lot more layers to this now when you factor that in. J.J. Watt, obviously, as they've stated, he joined CBS Sports in 2023 in his post-playing career. And honestly, he has become the number 2 at CBS Sports when it comes to color commentators pretty quickly. He got the role last season, did a lot of games with Ian Eagle, and his ability as an analyst to dissect the game in his own way, more specifically as a defender. He understands what he is talking about, and he also has done enough to relate to some of the younger fans watching the game. You know, having that blend is a great spot for J.J. Watt to be in and possess at this moment, and it's worked out for him tremendously. One of the best defensive players of the last generation, expounding his knowledge on this fan base as they try to understand what is going on with their team, or even addressing the casual viewer out there, trying to get a sense of, okay, what are some things to look out for? What exactly do I need to know in order to shore up my knowledge of the game? Watt has done a great job of that. And so when you have a man in Watt who is seemingly rising up where Tony Romo is beginning to miss the mark on more than several occasions at this point, you just feel like a trend is on its way. I'm not saying that any of these things are true at all, but to cap off my insight on what is going on here, I would say this. The case on September 21st, the hearing, it still has to play out. And from there, we'll see what kind of penalties Tony Romo would be facing at this time, with the expanded amount of charges being levied against them. The CBS Sports team at that time has enough to either stay silent on the matter and continue to allow Tony Romo to sit back and take a beat. They can decide to eventually call him back up and allow him to get right back into the number one spot after more interventions. When you hear about some of the meetings that he has had to personally have with people having to drive to his home and talk with him over game film. Like, genuinely, this is not a new thing for these people. This is a pattern that they want to solve, that they want to address, and maybe by giving him this leave, forcing him to obey it, they have an opportunity to sit him down and get him back into prime shape to recapture some of that essence he has clearly lost in their eye. 3, for me personally, they could look to J.J. Watt throughout the course of the entire season, and they can run it as an audition. They allow Tony Romo to sit out for the entire season. As bold of a risk as that may be, to showcase what J.J. Watt has to offer in an effort to potentially usurp Romo as the number one guy and hand the reins over to J.J. Watt. If the chemistry is good off the rip with him and Nance in the booth, along with Wolfson on the sideline, you don't hear anything about any lapses in judgment. You don't hear any complaints from other people working on the inside about misconduct from J.J. Watt. And you hear constant praise about the little things that Tony Romo seemed to miss out on over the past few years and just completely deny, like a lack of watching film. Those are the kinds of things you were hearing about Tony Romo, and with some of what I was reading. And if you have J.J. Watt bring that same kind of energy that Romo was lacking to the number one position over the course of an entire season of work, by that point, it would be hard to look at CBS Sports and say that they would be making a wrong decision to elevate J.J. Watt's role and potentially demote Tony Romo. So that's where I would personally stand with it. And, a lot of people may not look at that as the case right now, considering how much money Tony Romo is being paid. But it is possible. And then the fourth thing, which I think is unlikely, is that he would be fired. They look at the entire situation and stack it up with whatever happens. Whether he comes back, whether he is demoted to number 2, or whether he faces more severe penalties in this hearing. They understand that this return of his is no longer worth saving, and that as an analyst, he has truly lost the luster he once possessed. They admit defeat, and he goes. He walks to a different network. Maybe struggles for a little bit to find pole positioning elsewhere, but gets another job some point down the line. That's how I would look at it. You just, in his situation, even if it looked on paper and even if it was reported as a minor ordeal here compared to your standard DUI and other sorts of incidents like these, there is a level of irresponsibility that he possessed in these moments to have this quarrel and this sarcastic tone with his officer while they're trying to investigate what's happening, the constant pleas for a lawyer with simple orders being given, just a general lack of awareness seemingly for a guy who's clearly smart, yet deciding to leave an open bottle of alcohol in their car. We didn't get a sense of the placement of this bottle, but to have it in there in the first place, knowing that that is also part of the law, it's something that they can place on you. If there is an open container of alcohol, you're not supposed to do that. That is the law. So Tony Romo is to blame for Tony Romo's plight. Whatever may happen to him, regardless of, what I think in regards to, hey, he may not really face the full brunt of the law in regards to what happened. But he is more than liable for what has gone on to this point. And now, even though the decision of what happens with him next is up to pretty much everyone else, there's only one man for all of the hype and for all of the great work that he had done up to this point in at least the first few years of his time with CBS Sports, going all the way back to 2017, he has placed himself at a point of potentially no return by not maintaining that hunger that he once had to seemingly be the best color commentator in the game, by moving around in this manner, intoxicated while operating a vehicle after coming from a golf course. And now you're seeing it. He's on leave from his job. He had to back out of several other golf events, which when those came out, because this was right around the same time you first heard of the initial report, I'm like, I'm not going to report on that. That's nothing worth much of an update, really. But it all factors into the equation here. The Tony Romo that was once there seems to not be anymore. And he may very well be on his last straw. Even with the incident itself being a bit of a small occurrence here and not as major of a deal, everything else around that is just stacked up over the years. So now we're going to truly see what they'll do in response to that overall. in the weeks and months to come, potentially. But yeah, that was the main follow-up there. Now, it doesn't take away too much from everything else that has happened. Again, a pretty wild week in the sense of virtually every respect. To start it out, you had a lot going around about DeAndre Hopkins. There were reports saying that he was officially retiring from football. There were reports saying that he joined a college team to now work on their coaching staff. And the second report proceeded to be mostly true. Because he himself would come out and say that he wasn't formally retiring from the NFL. That if the opportunity came about, he would try to come back and join a team if they call. But for now, officially, per Adam Schefter and other sources, he is joining Georgia Tech as an assistant wide receiver coach. What a damn plot twist. The triple option ass school calls up one of the best wide receivers in the game for years to come join them and to help coach up the next generation of wide receivers donning that yellow jacket uniform. That is very wild to me. I wouldn't have expected them to pick up a player like that. To be completely honest with you, who the hell would have thought they'd get their hands on DeAndre Hopkins of all wide receivers? You would think that just off that signing alone, it should help their ability to sling the rock if they choose to. Like, DeAndre Hopkins is going to do his thing. I trust what he has done over the past decade and some change since coming out of Clemson, which, ironically enough, an ACC rival of theirs, a bit of a missed opportunity for those guys, but he'll help Georgia Tech in that wide receiver crowd a lot. I don't question that at all. It's just about everything else. Whoever's running the offense in Georgia Tech, who the head coach, Brent Key, calling the shots there. Are we going to get on the same page and allow them to showcase their talent, or are we just going to mash the football into the dirt on every single possession? That is the only way the Yellow Jackets break out of that shell. They need to shed off the triple option label now. You don't get a coordinator like that. You don't get a wide receiver coach like that and maintain the same dry-ass playbook. You gotta switch it up. It is 2026. We can't keep living all the way back in the Notre Dame era in the fucking 1930s when it comes to this triple option shit, bro. We're not in the 1990s anymore when Nebraska thrived with Tommy Frazier and the like off that specific playbook. We are in the modern day. You gotta break out of it to last and compete with these other teams in the ACC as they garner more and more and more talent. But for DeAndre Hopkins himself, he's gonna ball out. Y'all, hey man, you know, in the same way, not the same way that Hartline at Ohio State, now the USF head coach, was able to influence a lot of the best wide receiver prospects in the nation to consistently come to Ohio State year in, year out. And yes, there is still an effect as well of some players still choosing Ohio State over others because of the prestige of the organization. If DeAndre Hopkins sticks with it enough, maybe he eventually reaches that level where, hey, you join Georgia Tech as an elite prospect, the 5-star prospect, 4-star, trending towards 5-star prospect because of DeAndre Hopkins being on the coaching staff. Man, that would be pretty damn good. I'm not gonna lie. That sounds nice. We gotta see if he gets there though. Only time will tell. Moving on from that though, Ricky Pearsall would undergo season-ending surgery on a reaggravated PCL injury, meaning that he will miss the rest of the season. It's just insane. I had already alluded to it, and I just, at that point, wasn't sure about, okay, would they try to get this done, or would they force him to sit out the rest of the year? There was an initial report from Adam Schefter and other people that he had re-aggravated it, and that there was a concern. Now that concern is reality for them, as he will miss yet another year. And to be honest with you, it's just unfortunate for Ricky Pearsall. I mean, this is generally how his entire career has gone to this point, and it sucks, okay? You just run up and down the list of injuries for Ricky Pearsall to this point. Before he got into the NFL even, he was shot. And he had to recover from that. Still managed to play 11 games in his rookie season. Somehow, by some miracle. And thank goodness that he was able to recover from that. But this is just how it has gone for Ricky Pearsall. To have to go through that before you even get in the NFL, then you're still dealing with injuries up and down your body, quite frankly, over the course of your career to this point. It is just one of the more recent instances of a player just having some fortunate injury luck entering the NFL. Of course, again, he played 9 games last season, but, towards the halfway mark of the year, after a solid first few games in the season, his momentum after that was just zapped completely because of injury. Like, literally, you look at how he started out his 2025, and, I mean, maybe not against my team would I like to see it happen, but, bruh, first game of the season, goes for 108 yards, has a solid first 4 weeks with 2 100-plus yard games, and then he just misses so much time across the next few weeks. 7 straight games in a row. So he finishes with 528 yards on the season, when he was probably on early pace to go for far more and truly ascend to that number 1 role that the 49ers have honestly been looking for years, out of one of the older players they got from the 2024 draft. Now, this is obviously a trend for the 49ers that has just continued everywhere, and I mean everywhere. We'll get to that. For Pearsall in this case, this was a season for him where, likely, he could have been a number 2 wide receiver lining up on the outside still. And he won't even get an opportunity to make a jump in year 3 because of this. So it's just like, man, you hate to see it, bro. You really do. I just really hope that he can recover from it very soon. Because this gets me to my next question about this, before moving forward off this subject. If you had Ricky Pearsall suffer this injury last year, right? And hear me out. You had him suffer this injury last year. Why did you not put him on the short track to get straight into a surgery for this PCL right then and right there? He comes back and you're telling me that he's still allowed to play on it, and that nothing over the past few months is done about it, and he gets back in training camp and he re-aggravates it, and all of a sudden we now have concern about it as the disaster is happening, rather than doing everything beforehand, using and utilizing every potential preventative measure to force him into a recovery state far earlier in the timeline here. This surgery could have been done last season, and he'd probably still be recovering it from it right now, but at the very least, you know that you would have him for the regular season, ready to go, no questions asked. Instead, your asses decide that it's a good idea to allow him to play on the injury, to allow him to go home, rest up, still deal with the nagging effects of the injury, and not get anything done about it. Who was in his ear telling him that it was a good idea to maybe not get a second opinion, to maybe not get an earlier surgery done? I would like to know the answer to that question, because that would be who's really at fault in this scenario. Ricky Pearsall himself, at the end of the day, is trying to make a name for himself in the league. And while I can say that you'd want a player to be smarter about how they are using their body, at the same time, if you are seeing Pearsall going out there trying to work his ass off to maintain a roster spot, despite whatever is confronting him at the moment, from a physical standpoint, it is in your best interest as a front office or as a coaching figure to get in there and tell him to sit down, to tell him to stop playing. So I'm looking at all those guys. All of them. Because there's no way that you allow this to happen. That is a situation that you can definitely control. The injury itself, no. How you handle these things matters as an organization. And this is a complete and total misstep. An example of how not to approach a situation like this. Honestly. Moving on from that, though, the Falcons would set themselves up for the first of a pair of very interesting moves. This one, compared to the other one I'll get to later, is a bit more unexpected, as they would sign Matthew Bergeron, a guard of theirs, to a 4-year, $96 million contract extension on Saturday. They made the point, as I was looking through everything, hearing back about the report and looking at some of the posts that were put out, that they are investing a combined $173 million or so in the likes of Bergeron and Chris Lindstrom. When it comes to Matthew Bergeron, I'm just not really sure about him. This is a guy for me that has gone under the radar a little bit. I guess you can argue that he had a very strong 2025. Only 2 penalties on the year overall. Seemed to be very great as a run blocker. And considering the season that the likes of Allgeier, the likes of Bijan Robinson had running the football, especially up the middle, it proved to be great enough for him to get paid as one of the best guards in the entire league. I am not in a position to understand how true or untrue that may be, but he's getting paid like it. And, they've already made the transaction. There is no overturning it now, so they are expecting that he maintains that over the next few years at the very least. If he can, he'll make himself a household name. And to pair that up alongside Chris Lindstrom, in such a short time too, he's only 26 years old, so he's fairly young. That is a solution that could prove to be long-term for him if everything works out as they expect it to. Lindstrom himself is 29. So, you got a pair of younger guards nearing the primes of their careers at the position, as long as they continue to hold up. I do like to see that from Bergeron as well. You can question about the talent, but you cannot question the availability. He's played in all 15 of the games he appeared in last season and started them, and he started off his first couple years appearing in all 17 regular season games. So, hey, regardless of what you want to say, he's consistently going to be there, playing, and just consistently sealing up the core of that offensive line. As much focus as they have had on some of the other positions, going for cheap for the blindside blockers out there. The likes of Jawan Taylor and Wanya Morris via trade earlier in the offseason. Now with this move, they secure an opportunity to further expand their interest in attaining those young guards who are elite at their jobs and going damn near for broke to make sure that they stay there, if you want to look at it from that standpoint. It just hasn't been an issue for them, and they think that Bergeron, with his pickup in 2023, is a large reason for that. So they're well within their right to pay him accordingly. I can't knock them for that. Moving on to the Steelers, as they sign Rayshawn Jenkins. Yes, sir. That man is back. He's staying in the AFC North, but he is going to the most expensive defense in the league. I think that's a pretty good addition for them. They just want to maintain their physicality. Now, granted, Rayshawn Jenkins will enter his age 32 season, and you could look at it and say that, hey, the Steelers already have a lot of young safeties. Well, not a lot of young safeties. Let me rephrase that. They feel young, but they're a little older. This now pairs Rayshawn Jenkins up with the likes of Jalen Ramsey, of all people. And we understand what Jalen Ramsey is trying to do to prolong his career. So, you have a little bit of scruff on the back end of that defense. But let me tell you something. It's worth it with the way that Rayshawn Jenkins plays football. And bringing that element back to this defense is something that they desperately need. That expensive defense title means nothing if you don't have backbone. And believe me, you are going to feel Rayshawn Jenkins giving 110% effort on that football field on every single down. You're going to feel him as he crushes a ball carrier over the middle of the field. You're going to consistently hear him. And in ways, for that defense, he could be another vocal leader on that field, calling out plays as a veteran and making sure that other players who are young and trying to keep themselves composed and locked into the game, like a Joey Porter Jr., like an Asante Samuel Jr., players of those types, making sure that they have their heads on straight. Like that's incredibly important. So Jenkins is going to be a great addition for them. And also, when you look at him being paired up alongside Jaquan Brisker as well, who obviously is on the younger end, even when it comes to that, it's like, bro, you have Jenkins being a player who can tackle at a very high rate and who is that physical. Brisker wants to bring the same edge to his own play. If they can truly build it out, this defense could generally be a sneaky one. And I think that's what they're banking on here. It's not a long-term deal for Jenkins. This is obviously his third stop in as many years. So he's been around a little bit. But man, if they give it a chance, it can give them a boost they most certainly won't discredit at all. Moving on to a few injuries to wide receivers that were reported by Adam Schefter, because at around the same point, all of Dejon Stribling, Cyrus Allen, and Xavier Worthy were all dealing with injuries at a point during training camp. They took Stribling out that day due to his injury. They held Cyrus Allen out for a little bit, but he managed to be okay. And they also mentioned that Xavier Worthy needed some work as well due to a particular injury. So, and all across training camp, you're still hearing all this stuff about people getting hurt left and right. It's crazy. The 49ers, again, in Stribling's case, like they recently drafted him, they thought that he was the best prospect for them. And so they have high hopes for the kid, but he's not out there able to prove it at the moment while he's dealing with injury. Cyrus Allen as well. I watched him at Cincinnati, and honestly, for the Chiefs, for a team that needs consistent wide receiver play, and frankly hasn't gotten it from Xavier Worthy, hasn't really gotten it from Rashee Rice, outside of a couple instances, they're looking for help anywhere they can get. Cyrus Allen might be on the shorter end, but he is truly a pretty good wide receiver prospect coming out of college. I don't think it's enough for people to be saying that he could be the next Tyreek Hill, but let me tell you something. If he does come out the gates and he provides them with sure hands, he gives them an ability to stretch the field like they have failed to do in the past few years, then you're easily dealing with a player who maybe wasn't regarded as a top-end receiver in the class, but who can come in and honestly shift the entire course of this Chiefs offense if he's given the opportunity to so early on. You also want Worthy as well to go crazy in the system. We all know that he has the speed, he has the dynamic ability in his play style to make things happen all over the field. And largely, to this point in his NFL career, he has not met those expectations. Again, he's been all right. All right can be a very tough label to shake off, especially in the case of a wide receiver, in the kinds of money being rolled out consistently. That all right label will get you a very short contract compared to some of the other guys out there. So, Worthy, and yes, you need him to be a bit healthier. Because granted, I could say that he probably would have been on pace for a pretty great second year, especially with what we saw in the Super Bowl. But he got hurt at the start of the season. He played with injuries throughout the course of this season. And again, when you can only run deep, and when you are only being told to run deep and run fast down the field, it makes things a little bit predictable. The defense continued to snuff all of that out. And by that point, he had no chance to go for 50-50 catches because he's on the smaller side. So those are all things that they will have to go through the growing pains for in order to make it work. But I believe that they can get there. The Lions signed Devin White to a 1-year deal. And honestly, I don't know what it was about 2025 specifically. This season just did a lot in regards to resurgences for linebackers with the first name Devin. The fact that this happened twice, not only with Devin Bush, but also Devin White last season, is very interesting and something that should genuinely be studied until the end of time, quite frankly. You genuinely could not imagine Devin White being able to turn things around in 2025. There were conversations about this man nearly being out of the NFL. Obviously, things soured in Tampa Bay. He wasn't utilized, frankly, at all in Philadelphia, and then got to Houston, but didn't see a large role with the team at any point in that season. So he's just sitting around meddling in free agency over the course of the 2025 offseason, and he gets over to Las Vegas. Now, yes, they sucked. They did not play well. There's a reason why they held a number 1 overall pick. That seemed to be in spite of everything that Devin White himself was contributing on a contract that honestly might have been his last real opportunity in the NFL, barring any other unforeseen circumstance. He proceeded to have a career year for himself. He had 3 pass deflections, he forced a fumble, and he did have an interception, but he also was a tackling machine, finishing as one of the top players overall in the NFL when it came to tackles, with 174 combined. Yeah. Imagine that situation for a man who was kind of dissected as not being great overall in coverage and having some struggles over the past couple of years with being able to effectively secure tackles. Now he plays like one of the best in the league at that specific element of his game and turns in that performance. Surprisingly, he wasn't named a Pro Bowler, but at the same time, again, it doesn't matter, and the Raiders just were not really going to log a lot of votes for any of their players in that regard. So I get it. But he definitely played himself into another deal. That is essentially a make or break it season. And he definitely made fucking bank. Now, it doesn't secure him a long-term extension with the Lions right now. Though, granted, it is 1 year. They have the option to, at the end of next season and maybe into the next offseason, revisit the conversation then and determine whether or not they want to keep around Devin White. But for the short term, thinking in the context of this season, this is an ideal move for them. On the one end, when you're thinking about it, it replaces Alex Anzalone immediately. This was a position playing primarily in the inside that Alex Anzalone filled alongside Jack Campbell as well, obviously a great linebacker in his own respect. So you pair those two up together, and Campbell, if you still think that Devin White does struggle in some aspects of his defensive coverage, well, Jack Campbell has that covered. If you need Devin White to play free range, that's where he's going to fit the best, and you instantly upgrade over Alex Anzalone in regards to picking him up for cheap, considering that Alex Anzalone, of all linebackers, managed to get a multi-year deal that is worth far greater than Devin White's as of the recording of this video. Like, you'll definitely take that compared to the alternative. On the other end, just separate from the immediate contributions as a secondary starter at that position, if you ever fall on hard times with the defense, you have another player that you can build around. Obviously, in the Dan Campbell era, in its entirety, quite frankly, and more specifically over the past couple of seasons, the defense has just been not even like just plagued with injury. Like, it's no joke. It feels like everyone, and I mean everyone, at some point or another, for that defense was hurt for a couple weeks, placed on IR, were out and ruled out for the rest of a season. It's gotten to that level with this defense. Damn near every starter has gone through it. Damn near every backup has gone through it. Last season, it got so crazy that the backup's backup, on several occasions, at several different positions, had to be placed in the starting lineup. That's how horrific these injuries have been. We're out here lining up guys like Thomas Harper, who was literally like a 6-string safety for this team. Up on the back end, we have linebackers who were practice squad players being activated last season for this Lions defense. And it goes vice versa for some other positions out there. So while you may not have to worry about that in the back of your mind, if you need Devin White to lead your defense, I mean, that's a lot better than just truly leaving it up in the air for anyone to grab and no one to truly seize. Like, that's just where I think it's a bonus. It is such a bonus to add Devin White to this team. Because for the sake of, keeping everyone healthy and making sure that you don't lose your stride even when injuries come about, man, you needed something like that. Genuinely. Moving on from that, we would see the first of our retirements here because Andrus Peat, a former Saint and an offensive lineman, would retire from the NFL after 11 seasons. Andrus Peat had been there for the still effervescent peak of Drew Brees' tenure with the organization. He turned himself into a 3-time Pro Bowler in back-to-back years from 2018 to 2020, still protecting Brees well into his early 40s. So this is mainly Pete's legacy when it comes to working with the Saints. And let's just say that the few years since then have not been very kind to Pete as well. He, honestly, in a season as great as he's been, he's never played a full season. And the injuries in the last few years have genuinely hurt him a little bit. He played only 6 games in 2021. He was a backup in Las Vegas, of all teams, in 2024. A team that really could have used him on the offensive line. And granted, he was 31 at that point. There might have been a bit of a physical decline. Who knows? But it sends a message when even the Raiders are not willing to place you as a starter at that position. Potentially over the likes of other guys who maybe didn't deserve the role by the end of it, yet still were given the benefit of the doubt and being cast into the fire that Andrus Peat, no doubt, probably could have handled a lot better. Then you have a similar situation in 2025 where he's only activated as a starter for half of the games and appears in only 6. Clearly he had been a very solid offensive lineman for so many years, especially holding it down as a tackle. And even then he was listed as that, although his career seen him play primarily guard. So he could move all over the place, in theory at least, and it worked for years until it just failed to by the end of his career. Again, part of the mature thing to do is to understand when exactly it would be time for you to depart from the game. I know that the passion for Andrus Peat to play football is definitely high. You would get where he's coming from. It is, again, not a decision that would come easy to him, but going on 33, there are still clearly things for him he wants to see and do. While he still has an opportunity to go about it in the same way, without any restriction. And that's just something you have to respect. He'll be 33 later in the year, but he chooses to retire now, and at the moment, hang up the cleats. He'll go down as a very legendary player in Saints franchise history. I don't know if I can say much for the other stops, but again, that wasn't really in the plan for them to make him an important piece in the first place, and he proceeded to get the short end of the stick with that decision. But moving on from that into CJ Gardner-Johnson, who, per Adam Schefter, had been dealing with a lower calf strain and was taken out of practice during that time. So hopefully by this point, because it's been a couple days since then, I would hope that he's recovered from that. They don't see it as an injury that is too major and threatens to cost them the season. It's not to that extent, but they're working on a timeline here, and they're working to make sure he gets back up to speed with everything while he recovers near the facility. Another update from Adam Schefter and other sources stated that Brian Bresee was confirmed to have a torn ACL and would undergo season-ending surgery himself. So again, a similar situation here involving a player in Brian Bresee, who along with this Saints team is really trying to take it back and become a potential division champion. Drafted in the same 2023 year, and honestly, he has been a player who's gotten off to a solid start. You saw a career high 7.5 sacks in 2024. His numbers dipped a little bit in 2025 from that category, but he also had more tackles and was on the same pace for tackles for loss, despite missing 2 games. So, you see that from Bresee. You see that there are steps being taken to become a better defensive tackle, and with an opportunity to, in what looks like a contract year, make himself seen and make it clear that his play, rather than any talk, rather than any potential narrative, is going to be the deciding factor in his ability to get a long-term contract, or a team seeing a lack of availability and looking to pick him up in a trade, in a swing that sends him to a different organization and forces the Saints to punt on him at a very early age. That's just, man, it's rough to think about it that way. You would hope that's not how the Saints treat the situation, because he has given you a lot in such a short amount of time. And you wouldn't want to have that, an injury that for him clearly sucks, but knowing the circumstances, it would be slimy if they tried to treat him like that. I think so. I'm not going to lie. Let me see. The Texans also signed Jadeveon Clowney, meaning that he was going to return to the place where it all started. Hey, even if you're looking at it as like, the one hit changed Jadeveon Clowney's whole career and made him a number 1 overall pick. Yeah, say whatever you want about that. Clowney, with some of the stuff I've been hearing on him, he was actually one of the better free agent edge rushers left on the market, and he, for the Texans, is cheap. Consider the kinds of money that they have given out to their edge rushers, with Danielle Hunter given a $40 million contract this offseason, and then also Will Anderson Jr. smashing the market for edge rushers. You just want to slide in a veteran to see how exactly they can fit on this defense, because Clowney is in a spot where he's enough of a veteran that he won't need the same talking to, that he can, distribute some of these duties on the field and continue to showcase his solid skill set. Like Clowney, of course, may never get to a point in the NFL where he matches the hype that surrounded him coming out of college. But when it comes to his role on these teams, at every single stop, aside from Tennessee in 2020, he has had a year that at the very least for Clowney places him as a great value edge rusher in this league. Last year, for example, with Dallas, even though they're still recouping from the loss of Micah Parsons, not having DeMarcus Lawrence anymore, obviously picking up Quinyon Williams, he still puts together 8.5 sacks and 4 pass deflections with a forced fumble last season, and also 41 tackles, 12 for loss. Just stacking it up like that without much of a sweat. That is where you would like to see your edge rushers consistently dominate. Knowing that the energy is always going to be so high that there is no angle that a quarterback could even take before that lane closes up in a matter of 5 seconds. That's how good all these guys are. And they just, they want to carry it forward. Moving on to the Saints again, though, because they would get news that Jalen Polk, the wide receiver that they had picked up from the Patriots, and I think just a general transaction here, he would retire from the NFL and was placed on the team's reserve retire list, per Adam Schefter and other sources. It was so random. Jalen Polk it feels like he was just drafted and was just picked up by the Patriots. Obviously, that had already happened like a couple years ago. But by this point, man, Polk, honestly, you look at that entire core of Washington wide receivers, there were some people thinking that, after seeing what they looked like on the field, they all were expected to have astounding careers. And to this point, it just has not happened for Polk. It really comes down to a matter of, I think, just some struggles to, one, stay healthy, and two, to really find a role with either of these teams. In 2024, yes, you're kind of being thrown into the middle of things, but even still, he was probably the 5th or 6th wide receiver option on the team. And that's despite them not being great. Like, literally, 2024 for them was a year where they went 3-14. And so, to put those contributions up on a team that was clearly struggling didn't get him off to the right start, I would think. He didn't even appear in a game in 2025 for the Saints. And he was traded there last offseason. Never appeared in a game. Like, they thought that they could still trust about 7 or 8 of their other wide receivers, with as bad as that group truly was, outside of Jalen Polk on that roster alone. And it's like, at what point do we just say the experiment is over? We gotta cut this off. Well, it doesn't always have to be the teams initiating it, because Polk decided to himself via his Instagram post that I saw about from multiple areas. Like, that's just not a consistent shadow you want to be living in. When you're looking to play wide receiver, you obviously want the ball. And I think both of the teams just understood that his specific role was not one that was going to be important to the team's success. So they did not give him the ball. They didn't really grant him many opportunities. And I think that feeling compared to others is just one that, you can struggle to recover from at times. Like, to be told that by other people, just, yeah. They were mentioning that he deactivated his social media shortly thereafter, so I'm going to have to take a look at that for myself. You hope that there is nothing potentially going on, and that he is making the decision just to make it. Like, like, we can't say that. he could very well be at peace with how things have gone for himself at this time. He's entitled to feel that way. I don't know. All right, the 49ers decided to sign Khalil Herbert, which I didn't even know that he was on the market, to be quite honest with you. I didn't even know there were teams still checking for the man. I'm not going to lie to you. I had no clue. I mean, this dude, genuinely, you look at everything that has gone on with him. The fact that the Jets, of all teams, even decided to put him on a roster last season and give him an opportunity to play, with them having the likes of Breece Hall and Braylon Allen, surprised me, and he proceeded to have 16 rushes for 52 yards. Now, granted, he didn't start a game, but I just don't really see it. Now, they cited the reasoning of his signing came down to the fact that Jordan James, with the rib injury that Fred Warner apparently caused because of how hard he hit the ball out of his hands, yeah, that was another thing going on at 49ers practice. They proceeded to sign him. This was why. I just don't see what Herbert could possibly provide for them. Genuinely. Again, Herbert, when it comes to him, he's never been an every game starter. He's never been. You know, he did have non-starts for Chicago in 2023 and had a decent season. I mean decent. His better days have seemed to pass him. It just will not take any of the burden off of what they've already been dealing with. You have Jordan James hurt. You have Christian McCaffrey still commanding a lot of the touches, which is where, again, the deal ultimately isn't going to feel like much whenever you have that man, number 23, in your backfield. Of course, the entire offense is going to revolve around him when he's out there. So, sure, you're not going to ask Herbert to come in and command a lot of the reps as it is. There aren't many running backs worse at maximizing their carries and their touches. There aren't many running backs worse. We're talking 3.3 yards per carry in the ones he attained last year. And it's been a consistent decline in that. I just do not know or understand the logic that they are using to make this decision. What makes you think that this is going to work? 3.3 with the Jets, 2.0 with the half season in Chicago in 2024. Like, what? I just am failing to see it. Like, I must be missing something. Because the last time I checked, that's not going to get it done at all in a division rife with very solid defensive line play. Again, McCaffrey's going to handle a lot of the load, and he'll still be asked to do that. If you were thinking about taking the burden off of McCaffrey to maybe take some of the rushes away, give him some breathing room and give him some time to rest so that his body can remain in top tier shape for those more high leverage games and those matchups against opponents who are going to be very damn great at what they do. You failed at that if you're San Francisco here. Because Herbert is not the running back you signed for that purpose. Yeah, it helps to have an extra body on the roster, sure. This does you no good. This does you no good. I have to be honest with you. Like, let's have a look-see at what things are shaping up to be for this team right now when it comes to that specific position. Okay? At least if they have it out right now. Like, you still have, if I'm not mistaken, Isaac Grando coming back from injury at some point. So again, like, you're signing him, of all people, to become a guy who isn't going to factor into the offense. They also drafted Kalon Black in the 2026 draft. He himself, again, is a guy that probably won't receive any starts, but even he, you could argue, would probably fit a lot better on this team and will probably contribute at a far more efficient rate than Khalil Herbert has in any point over the last 3 years and over the last 3 seasons of play. It just hasn't been there for him. So I don't know why he's being treated as if, with this signing here, that he's somehow magically going to turn back the clock and become a sneaky third option in this running back by committee system. That's not how this is going to go. Like, we've seen Khalil Herbert enough to understand at this point that he is exactly who he is as a player, especially over the past 2 seasons. Why would we be led to believe that would change all of a sudden now? That's just not how this is going to go. I just have to be incredibly honest about that. But moving on from that, not to go completely overboard there, it was reported that Myles Garrett was dealing with a form of lower body soreness, apparently, as Adam Schefter stated. And even McVay said that this was going on, but that they didn't have a lot of concern over it. He seemed to still be out there, still participating in a lot of the different activities around the training camp. So it's probably something that isn't much to worry about, I would think. But, you want to monitor the situation because you traded for him. And, yes, maybe you wanted Jared Verse gone. But that's a lot of value to give away for a player who is obviously that great. And you want to make sure that he is out there on the field. So I would definitely understand if they just sharpen up a little bit on their supervision in regards to how he moves around on the field. Because what you don't want is a situation like the 49ers continue to face. And again, this video, if not for the Tony Romo follow-up, if not for some of the other stuff to come in literally just a few short minutes, I'm telling you, this video could still be defined by a lot of the 49ers injuries. And I'm just being brutally honest here. It's not a matter of joking. Like, this is obviously not stuff to, just marvel at or just laugh at. This is stuff that is incredibly ridiculous at this point. The amount of times you're seeing 49ers players get injured here. Like, it does lead you to believe in a lot of crazy things. Because Mike Evans is currently dealing with a quad strain, per Adam Schefter. And mind you, to become the number 1 wide receiver in that offense and potentially chase a championship, if the 49ers could make a run there, you brought in Mike Evans to be the number 1. And when he's on the field and consistently healthy, the man literally opened up his first 11 years in the NFL as a 1,000-yard wide receiver. Only Jerry Rice was more consistent, right? So you look at that body of work and you don't question Mike Evans and what he can add to this roster for a second. If not for everything that happened last year. When he played in the 8 games last year, his overall involvement in the offensive scheme seemed to diminish. and his numbers took a massive hit. He also, again, missed 9 games due to injury last season. He missed 3 games due to injury in 2024. So you're going from a man who had consistently appeared in at least 14 to 15 games a year and had, since 2020, appeared in at least all 15 for a matter of 4 straight seasons before only playing in a combined 22 games over the past 2 years. And while he still got the 1,000-yard mark in 2024, it took him until the final game of the season to do it. And it came under a lot of media scrutiny in the fashion in which he got it, because they essentially had to force feed him the ball. They did not have the same luck in 2025. He didn't even get remotely close. And while, yes, we feel for that an injury could cost Mike Evans an opportunity to do something truly historic and something never before seen to a lot of the current fan base that is younger and wasn't around to see Jerry Rice play in real time, only hear about him from their parents potentially, or look at highlights of his games over the course of the years he played. Zapped due to injury. That is a tough pill to swallow. I get it. This now seems to be a bit of reality for Mike Evans as he, gets up there in age a little bit, as that body starts to get worn down a little bit. And this is a case where you're going to have to be extremely careful if you're the 49ers. This is obviously a talent that you'd love to have, but man, if he is not out there, you have banked everything into making sure that this works. And now he ends up being another addition to the injury list, one that is already rife with players right now. And we, again, just started training camp. Just started. We're not even fully off the ground, and you have this going on. So again, something truly has to give way for this 49ers team behind the scenes, because this just cannot repeatedly happen. Moving on from that into a different injury, though, the Bears would have Coby Bryant suffer a hyperextended knee, a bone bruise, and a small fracture, which will force him to miss the next 8 to 10 weeks per Adam Schefter. All those things combined, I don't even want to run a potential image of what may have happened in my head. I don't even want to assume anything that could have happened with that. This is what is being stated. This is what happened during Bears training camp. And, with that being the case, you don't lose him for the season, which is the caveat in this. You don't lose him for the season, You miss him for the next 8 to 10 weeks, as of the recording of this video. It's August 4th. The news was just reported, so you're thinking that you can probably still get him back at the very least in early October, barring anything else. And that's good. It's just that, man, to fill out this new defensive lineup and allow these new players to fully ingratiate themselves with the team, they have to all be around at the start of training camp. That's when it matters the most. And I'm sure that it has already happened for Coby Bryant, but it's never a guarantee, especially when you're going to miss those months in a row like that and not be able to pick it back up at all. Again, I can't really play the game of just guessing what that would look like as an injury, but you can understand how painful those 3 injuries all happening at the same time could be for any person, let alone an NFL player. And so it is best for him to take care of that while he can. Like, the Bears should be understanding of that, I would think. You know, they didn't go out and pay him a 3-year deal for no reason. They obviously view him as a guy who can become one of the most important pieces on that team. And at the safety position, that's going to mean a lot for them when they lost each and all 3 of their safeties on their roster that started last season, with Kevin Byard III being gone, with Jaquan Brisker being gone, with CJ Gardner-Johnson also being gone, whether it be in free agency or due to trades. You bring in Coby Bryant as an exchange from Seattle to fill at least one of those roles and give them a solid back-end leader. And you may be at risk of potentially not even having that for the upcoming year, which would suck. But again, as long as the timeline goes smooth over the next 8 to 10 weeks, he'll probably be back and prepared in early October to start performing again. Jalen Pitre, for a bit of a deviation from all of those injuries and things, he was given a pretty interesting contract. Not a extension, because he's already on one with the Texans by this point. One that was well deserved when he first signed it. This has to do with him wearing a Guardian cap. All the stuff about the Guardian cap, boy. He is the first signature athlete that the Guardian cap company has, per Adam Schefter and a lot of other sources. Yeah, you'd never expect those news about a company making Guardian caps, signing an athlete to a lucrative deal. That's wild when you think about it. Only when you come back down to earth after looking at it for what it is, yes. Yeah. We have seen Jalen Pitre don that Guardian cap to make his head shape somewhat enlarged over the past few years. I've said it several times. Do you understand that this man is currently one of the hardest hitting safeties in the motherfucking NFL? There's a reason why he is wearing the Guardian cap, and it's because he's going to knock your ass out. Lay you out. As soon as you take one footstep near him, he will lay you the fuck out. And there is nothing you can do about it. You will feel all the effects of that hit, and he won't have to deal with any of it because of the Guardian cap. That's why he chose to wear it. He understands how much strength he possesses as a player, and he knows that even he himself may not be able to handle all that. The Guardian caps are meant for protection, in a way. That's why they were first phased out in, I believe, 2024. Okay, that's why they put them out there. It's another player safety initiative to encourage more players to put them on. Go ahead. They may not look the most appealing, but they're meant to keep you safe. And that's what Pitre wants to do. He wants to make sure that at the end of the day, apart from the football play on the field itself, he wants to keep himself protected outside of that space. Because trust and believe, the Guardian cap, if he wanted to truly be reckless, he wouldn't even worry about wearing one. And he'd still go about playing in the brutal way that he does. But that cap right there, while he can keep himself safe and cushioned, you're not. You may very well need one by the time he's done with you. A perfect representation of everything the Guardian Cap stands for. Wouldn't have it any other way. The Cowboys officially released Charles Snowden as well, the same individual who was sentenced to a 3-game suspension for an alleged DUI. So I with Snowden, and I made that point clear. It's like, yes, he's not going to be a player who might stick around for that much, because it's not a position that the Cowboys really think they would have to add to. And if they did, it would not be him that they'd keep. It's a matter of, again, regardless of where a player stands, you have to be able to keep this same energy for all players who are going through that. So a violation of the NFL's personal conduct policy here. No, wait, am I tripping? Right. Yeah, no, I'm not tripping on that. Goes back to that, and again, an earlier incident, but it caught up to him. And by that point, the Cowboys, at that point, had to make a bit of a decision here. So, no matter what direction they were going to go in, I mean, it's not one that is going to have universal praise or conjecture at all. Like, this is not a player viewed as an important piece for this team. They want to make space, and to be honest, as cutthroat as this is, let's call it what it is. It is far easier to give an opportunity to a player who maybe isn't a starter, but does have the ability, at least a feasible ability, to work his way up the roster, and maybe still has a bit of personal conduct issues himself. Way better to keep that than keep a player who has no chance and is an easy target pretty much to eliminate from a roster. That's how they view Charles Snowden, let's be honest. And as a result, he is out of there. I don't know if other teams would be taking him on. We'll have to see. Whoever does will have to take on the suspension as well, because that is going to carry over no matter what. But moving on from that into the first of our major extensions, because earlier this morning, per Adam Schefter and other sources, I get up, look at my phone, and see some breaking news. My blurry ass eyes, I blink them a few times to clear it up, and I just quickly swipe down to see what's going on. The Falcons signed Bijan Robinson to a 3-year, $75 million contract extension with $51 million guaranteed, giving him the richest running back contract in NFL history. Yeah. Yep. I've been saying it the entire postseason. We didn't know what the dollar amount was going to look like, but sooner or later, Bijan Robinson was going to get paid. It was a foregone conclusion. I have virtually, prior to this point, said everything about the Bijan Robinson contract that there is to be said about the Bijan Robinson contract. Just thinking that it would happen during the offseason, and now it has. As with the move, they keep around a running back who is truly one of the best in the NFL. He's still 24 years old, so he's still got so much room to grow as a player, which is scary. He's already asserted himself as one of the best running backs in the NFL, one of the best players in the NFL, regardless of position, throughout this time as well. It is a crazy ascent. to superstardom for this man. You have to respect it. Yes, am I out here thinking that his hairstyle is not realistic? Yes. But that aside, he's clearly a great football player. And when you have one that is got unquestioned talent, and isn't wrapping himself up in craziness off the field, it's a pretty easy decision to make for this team to extend him to the richest contract at that position. What a way we have come from, where you were looking at running backs not even being valued over offensive linemen, not even getting the same level of contracts here, only getting some of the higher value ones in the $10 million range. And then you've had this surge over the past few years with the likes of Saquon Barkley and James Cook III getting contracts that are paying $20 million or near that. And now we shoot for 25 with Bijan Robinson here. It's a far cry from the running backs being undervalued and underpaid and disrespected by the time they turn the age of 30. Then are viewed as damaged goods and not given a different long-term deal after that. This can put the running back position in an entirely different ballpark now and on an entirely different progression in the future. Robinson is worth every single penny. Every single one. Like, that is just not something that you can truly argue. Every single dime. The man literally acts as an all-encompassing safety valve. Alright? The run game is constantly going to be working. And even when it isn't, you're going to line him up out of the backfield. Kyle Pitts might be a little inconsistent. Drake London might be out of the game. Doesn't matter. As long as you have Bijan Robinson on your team, you're going to have a chance. And he has a number of different ways to beat you. So many different teams are clearly going to key in on him as the main focus of attention to stop or at least restrict. And even then, his presence alone opens up so many different attack mechanisms for this offense. Like you would not believe. He'll still get his too. You just have a player like that, it is hard to pass up on that. Adam Schefter, after the deal was done, would immediately put out a post pontificating about Jahmyr Gibbs' potential look now with this deal coming through. Yes, he will get paid too. Don't worry about it. Another running back here that I've mentioned, hey, he'll get his money at some point. Again, it's a crazy time to think that at a time, these two were considered as bad picks for their respective teams. They were swapped for each other, with the Lions ultimately sending the draft rights over to the Falcons for Bijan Robinson, and then the Lions deciding to take Jahmyr Gibbs with that pick. Both of them have panned out exponentially well. So, that timeline is crazy. They were traded for each other on draft night. They have had spectacular seasons in their own respects. They have seen some success later in the season. Obviously, Gibbs has been in the playoffs. And now they're here. Their paths intertwining again as they look to get on their second contract. And one that pays them very well. Just a wild timeline to be a part of. I don't think that Detroit's clock is ticking. I think that they'll be able to figure it out. They understand the running back talent that they have. Otherwise, they would not have literally sent away David Montgomery to the Texans and give the full reins, in theory, to Jahmyr Gibbs. They wouldn't have made that decision if they weren't viewing him as a number one running back in that offense. And the choice is theirs now. Again, you don't want to wait too long. Any number of things could happen in a year. The first few years of Gibbs' career, like Robinson's, have shown you that, hey, he's one of the best running backs in the league. We should pay him as such. But the talks are going to continue, Maybe Gibbs is of the belief that, hey, he might be able to worth a little more than $25 million. Maybe he's right up under that. You have to think about it if you're the Lions. And understand how much money is moving around already between you having massive contracts for the likes of Kirby Joseph, who's hurt, Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson. You have a lot of long-term deals. Some that have already kicked in, some that are yet to kick in. And so you have to just think about the concept of having all that on your books. But I think it's a good issue to have. The Lions, again, have had a great team. They just have not been able to put it all together. They have not been fully healthy as a team since that run to the NFC Championship game. And so a lot of questions are arising about whether or not they've missed their window. I think as long as that core is still intact, the Lions are always going to have a fighting chance, and they know that. So it would be best for them to do everything in their power to keep everyone around, and they'll be able to figure it out. I can't necessarily speculate as to when he will get a contract, but he'll get his deal. There's not a lot of fuss to be made about that. Moving on from that briefly, though, Ahkello Witherspoon had retired from the NFL earlier today. Also, this is a man who's played for several different teams in his career. He spent a lot of his time mainly in the NFC West, starting his career as a 49er and ending with the Rams, appearing for them last year before going out with injury a little bit. And he also spent time with the Steelers for a brief period of time in his career. He is a player who, honestly, was a pretty decent corner. He's not one that, sure, if he was the leading corner on your team, you were going to have problems. As a secondary piece, even a tertiary piece, he was decent, especially in the slot, which it looked like they tried to move him towards from time to time. Mainly, he played outside, and he had a few decent seasons in that spot, but none that will completely blow your mind from an outsider looking in. It's a pretty solid career where you will have corners at times, occasionally, not even get their shot in the NFL. So Witherspoon, from that standpoint, has had a lot of success. I think, though, with him, his career is always going to be a bit of a question mark. Yes, when he was healthy and playing, he was pretty solid. But you look at the course of his whole career, and from 2019 onward, his appearance numbers are just shaky. He played in 10 games in 2019. He played in 9 games in 2021 and just 4 games in 2022 for the Steelers. Then proceeded to play in just 6 matches last year and only started in 2 for a Rams defense that wasn't even considered as great, particularly, especially in the back half of the season, and especially in the height of the race for the NFC West. They weren't even that great, and yet Witherspoon wasn't given a chance to really appear in those games. Now, granted, some of that is probably due to injury, But, when you have that label on you, it's tough to shake that off. So, Witherspoon again was solid, but yeah, having that as the back end of your career is a little unfortunate, to say the least. And, of course, for now, it's a formal retirement. He's still a fairly young individual. He is only 31 years old. So I don't know what the next steps are for him following his NFL career. But you would hope that, hey, whatever he is doing, he is participating in something that he truly loves at the end of the day. It can be hard to find that outside of football for people who exclusively play it. But if he has found that, I'd hope that he can lean into that and, continue maybe a second venture in his career that's just as lucrative and just as also, from that standpoint, right, nurturing and immersive to his mindset, where his heart truly resides. That is ultimately the goal at the end of the day for him in his post-playing career. You want to find that kind of solace in another space entirely outside of football. And if he can do that, hey man. The Jaguars also placed Trystan Colon on the reserve and retired list as well. So a lot of players over the course of these, last few days or so, deciding to call it a career for a number of different reasons. In all of their respects, opportunity might not have been there, injuries might have plagued them. They might just think that it is time to call it a career as they enter, their mid to late 30s. Like, those are all genuinely fair reasons. No matter what the case is, if you're a team, now you have to figure out, hey, if this was a guy who chose to call it a career and is actively on the path of picking up recruiting, or picking up a spot on the roster, I should say, how exactly do you go about recruiting a different talent or a different player in there to potentially replace that at this stage of the offseason and heading into the preseason? It's a bit tricky to pull that off, I would assume. So that's just a lot that you would have to think about there. Kenyon Sadiq would have a bit of a setback reported by Aaron Glenn in his recovery from a hernia surgery that I already talked about him having earlier in the offseason. Apparently, per Adam Schefter and via Aaron Glenn himself, he doesn't think that it is something keeping him out of the loop to appear in week 1. So that's a good sign if that holds. But again, we have to see. You can have a lot of different responses to those injuries and those surgeries, depending on how you are kind of shaped and how your build is. So hopefully it's not too severe for Kenyon Sadiq and he can get back out there as soon as possible. And then for the last piece of news here, at least seemingly, right, the Ravens decided around noon that, we're going to get in the fun of extending our players just as well, because we absolutely can. As they would sign Zay Flowers to a 4-year, $140 million contract extension with about $108 million guaranteed. And upon looking at that at first glance, I'm thinking to myself, dude, let's focus on the positive. Yes, they get the deal done. There are a lot of thoughts about whether or not he would be paid, and he is now there for at least the next 4 years, as things are looking. He has been a player for them who, frankly, does serve right now as a great skill player at the wide receiver position, and possibly the most dynamic skill player they have on their team on either side of the ball. The second that man gets in space, you have to watch for him because he does have the potential to move around like a human joystick. He's going to shake and bake you a little bit and get into those spots and holes in the defense every time. And more often than not for the team, it proceeds to work out. So you love to see the Ravens pulling that off for him. It's a very great deal for him. And, more important than anything else, this is generational wealth he now gets his hands on. And anytime you can do that for yourself and for those players around you, it means that on the football field, to this point, you have done tremendous work for your team that they can't overlook. All the reports suggested that they wanted this deal to get done just as much as Zay Flowers did. So they were on the same page the entire time. Not a lot of back and forth about, a potential line of disrespect going on between the two sides, right? They were able to sit down and work together on this. And both managed to accomplish what they wanted here. You get the money to set yourself up for years and years to come. And you retain your spot as the best receiver, quite frankly, on one of the better teams, keeping that pairing with Lamar Jackson going as they continue to build that chemistry with each other, even to this point, and expand on it over the course of these last few years and in the next few to come. Clearly, it's a direct result of the restructuring that Lamar Jackson got, as well as some of the other players that they've lost throughout the year so far. It wouldn't have been possible for him to get this large of a deal without that. The Knicks trade with Max Crosby, the loss of Tyler Linderbaum in the same fell swoop, and obviously the restructure to Lamar's deal, all those are huge components in this. You're not complaining about it if you're the Ravens. Ultimately, it leads you to keep a player who you think is very good to retain for your services. So all that is fair play. And I'd be remiss to say that, hey, Zay Flowers doesn't deserve a contract. Yes, he does. The production has been there for him. There's a man who's on back-to-back Pro Bowl appearances and who has back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, including a career year last year. The amount of targets, 86 receptions, 1,211 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And that's in a year where he didn't even have Lamar Jackson for all of the games. So in some cases, as much as you want to say, you might not see it all in Zay Flowers just yet. At the same time, the man entering his age 26 season could have had a far better year than it shows on paper if Lamar Jackson was fully healthy for the entire season. And that just kind of tells you what you need to know when it comes to him. On the other side for this, and this is kind of where I fall admittedly, yes, he deserves a contract. This 4-year, $130 million deal, yes, the guarantee matters more, and honestly, the $27 million a year component there lines up a little more in Zay Flowers' ballpark. I did not think that he was worth over $30 million. Personally, this 4-year, $130 million deal is the exact contract that Justin Jefferson is getting. The exact one. And to have Justin Jefferson and Zay Flowers in the same sentence with the same contract, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I just have to be perfectly honest there. As I initially said as well, You look at how some of the other wide receivers have been getting paid before Zay Flowers got his. The Ravens kind of waited a little bit too long. The second that I saw that Christian Watson got the deal he got with 4 years and $110.4 million or so, the second he got that deal, I already knew that the Ravens were in some trouble, because that was the model that you would have to look for in order to determine how much money Zay Flowers should get paid. And you proceeded to have Christian Watson get the type of deal that, honestly, a player like Zay Flowers would have likely deserved. Like, that's wild to me. You know, I genuinely cannot believe that. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's incredibly stupid. That's more so on the Packers than anything else to overpay for a player in Christian Watson's position, while clearly Zay Flowers in his first 3 years has already outperformed the man across every single level. Yes, it would paint a very weird picture if you pay him in the same manner that you pay Christian Watson and put them on the same tier of each other. It looks very strange. But the question still remains for the Ravens. And, you know, they have to find a way to solve it. It's like, yes, Zay Flowers is getting paid. That's great for you. What makes you believe that he is truly the leading man for this team, and that he can assert himself as the best outside weapon they have? Because a lot of other people have their own questions. And when you are paying someone this much money, you want to be sure that they're probably one of the top guys at their position, frankly, top 10, top 5, whatever the case may be, and that they are the unquestioned X receiver on their team. While so many other Ravens, analysts, other analysts in the sport, fans of the team, want him to slide down to a slot position because they think he's going to play better there. You don't want to have that much invested in a player who isn't even really being given a true answer on what role he's expected to play for this team. If they can figure it out and he's still doing all this, that's perfect. But I just don't know if they have truly went about this the right way. And so we'll have to see about that. But that'll do it for this video. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.